ॐ शन्नो मित्रः शं वरुणः शन्नो भवत्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्तिः 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 सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्तिः 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 यश्छन्दसा मृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽध्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया आस्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरि विश्रुवं ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय ॐ शान्तिः 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 अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव कीर्तिः पृष्ठं गिरेरिव ऊर्ध्वपवित्रो वाजिनीव श्रमितमस्मि द्रविणगुंसवर्चसं सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः इतीर्थशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम् ॐ शान्तिः 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 पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः 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 ओ आप्यायन्तु मम अङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रमथो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि सर्वं ब्रह्मोपनिषदं माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत् अनिराकरणमस्तु अनिराकरणं मे अस्तु तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्माः ते मयि सन्तु ॐ शान्तिः 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 वाङ् मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविराविर्म एधि वेदस्य म आनीस्थः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासीः अनेनादितेन अहोरात्रान् सन्दधामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारमवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्तिः 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 भद्रं नो अपि वातयमनः ॐ शान्तिः 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 भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्तिः 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 यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तं ह देवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये ॐ शान्तिः Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpada Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha. Narayanam Padmabhubam Vasishtam Shaktim Cha Tatputra Parasharam Cha Vyasam Shukam Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Mathasya Padmapadam Cha Hasta Malakam Cha Shishyam Tam Totakam Vartikakaramanyaan Masmat Gurun Santatamanatosmi. Om Vishwam Darpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyam Nijantargatam Pashyannatmani Mayaya Bahiribodbhutam Yatha Nidraya Yasakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanamevadvayam Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Nama Idam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Ibijasyantarivānkuro Jagadidam Prang Nirvikalpam Punaha Maya Kalpita Desha Kala Kalana Vaichitriya Chitri Kritam Maya Viva Vijrambayatyapi Maha Yogi Vayasvechaya Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Nama Idam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Yasyaiva Sphuranam Sadatmakam Asatkalparthakam Bhasate Sakshat Tattvamasiti Veda Vachasa Yo bodhayatyashritan Yat sakshat karanat bhavenna punaravrittir bhavambo nidhau Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Nama Idam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Nana Chidra Ghatoddarastita Mahadipa Prabhabhaswaram Jnanam Yasya Tu Chakshuradikarana Dvara Bahispandate Janamiti Tameva Bhantam Anubhatye Tat Samastam Jagat Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Nama Idam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Deham Pranamapi Indriyanapi Chalam Buddhim Cha Shunyam Viduhu Stri Balanda Jadopamas Tvamiti Bhranta Bhrisham Vadinaha Maya Shakti Vilasa Kalpita Maha Vyamoha Samharine Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Nama Idam Shri Dakshina Murtaye. I was thinking that the Brahma Sutra, all the 555 sutras of Brahman, is like the coursework in an advanced medical college. I think this is the way to look at it. We should have a view of Brahma Sutra as the spiritual version of the best medical college courses that you can get, advanced courses up to the specialization. In the sense that medicines to cure one's problems are available. And you can go to the local drugstore, CVS or Walgreens or something, and get some non-prescription drugs from there. But if you really wanted to treat a disease, then the medicines have to be prescribed by a doctor that has gone through the discipline of study over a long period of time and practice and so on. And so that's what a medical degree in a medical college course provides for you, is the underpinnings of a very scientific approach to solving a disease. So this is one thing. But of course what happens is that the diseases that the medical college is equipped to solve are limited diseases. You may have an issue with your heart or your lungs or your tummy or whatever, and they do a good job of figuring out exactly what's causing it and how to treat it. So that's all there. Vedanta, on the other hand, is providing not a limited solution to a problem, but an unlimited solution to a problem. Not really available anywhere. And in doing so, it goes through, and this is the point I'm making, a very structured, prescribed courses of study in a very scientific manner. And I think by now you should all be aware of the fact, and you should really investigate it and be convinced of it if you're not, that Vedanta, the Vedantic study, is far more scientific than the so-called science that we are aware of. Because the methodology of a science is repeatability, predictability, up to a point. Because sometimes even the best analysis of a disease says we don't know why it didn't work. So that is the Maya's anirvachaniya, because anything which is transactional ends up being not completely known. But in the case of Vedanta, that's not the case. So even though Vedanta shares the basic methodology of science, which is repeatability, predictability, but it goes further in the sense that there is nothing left as uncertain. It is a complete exposition of the truth, bar none. And so in that sense, it is much more scientific than the so-called science. Why? Because the science only deals with vyavaharika sat. It does not recognize. It tries to, but it hasn't done a good job of figuring out. And it cannot do it, no matter how much it tries. The consciousness itself, which is behind everything. And so it leaves out a very important part of the whole analysis, and therefore the science is left into just describing the transactional reality. Vedanta, on the other hand, goes into paramarthika sat. Anyway, that's just besides the point. The main point I wanted to make is that Brahma Sutra is like an advanced medical degree where diseases are discussed, the causes are discussed, the sources of solutions are discussed, the doubts about it are discussed, the establishment of the truth is discussed, the method of everything that you can think about life in general is meticulously done as if it was in a course of knowledge. the course of medical knowledge. This is exactly how we should look at Brahma Sutra. And in some ways, prayers in a temple or sadhana practices, a certain belief in Ishvara, that it exists in many countries, and especially in India, where no study is done, but you have a sense of what to do, is not attending the medical college. But if you were to find out what are the underpinnings of this science and really study it, you'll come to Brahma Sutra. So Brahma Sutra in short should be considered as a coursework in an advanced medical college. That's how it is. Anyway, I just thought that idea occurred to me in terms of placement of where Brahma Sutra is, and I thought I'd start with that. Okay, so I think what we will do today is to continue on with the sum of, not the entire, sum of the Shankara Bhashya on the Adhyasa Bhashya, as we've been doing. And then I think today we will start the very first sutra itself. I'm hoping to do so. So where we are, what we were discussing last week was this. An assertion was made that the entire set of transactions in our life, barring none, everything about the life, all transactions that we have, all experiences that we have, are based on an erroneous thinking. This is a very tall thing to say. And it flies against our experience, because I don't see any errors per se. Everything seems to sort of make sense, because there is predictability. If you open your eyes, you can see things. If you close your eyes, you can hear from the ears. Water boils at 100 degrees centigrade, etc., etc. It all seems to be very methodical and real and predictable. So how can you say that it's based on an error? Well, this is the contention, that doubts that our minds have, and even other people who think through this question also have the same doubt. How can you do that? So here, that point is now being discussed. So let's get into that in a little bit more detail. So we had covered, in the way this Sanskrit text is written on this page that I had sent to you, that the first paragraph is done, the second paragraph is done, the third paragraph is also done. In the next page, the third paragraph, which started with Katham Punaha. Then now we are starting on the fourth paragraph, and we will go into quite a bit of depth on it, but then we will switch back to an overall analysis, and move on to Sutra number 1, because there are some details on the last paragraph that are not relevant in my view. They're relevant, always relevant, but not the details are not needed in our course of study anyway. So in the fourth paragraph, what we did last week, just to set the context, is the following. It says, Tam etam eva lakshanam adhyasam panditaha avidya iti manyante. Tad vivekena cha vastu swarupa avadharanam vidyam ahuhu. This is an important thing. So to repeat from what we did last week, he says that aviveka, the lack of discrimination between two things that are mixed up together, is considered to be ignorance in the eyes of the wise people. So just think about it. Just think about it. So we went through this last week that if you don't know something, then that is called ignorance. But here you are taking something. You're taking something. But you're not taking it the right way. So this should be different than ignorance. Ignorance means you don't know it at all. But if you know something, so another thing we can do is that suppose you see a person, but you don't know who he is or she is, and you are told this is that person, then you recognize. So there is an ignorance of, so supposing my brother should come into this room right now behind me, and you've never met him, you don't know him, and now I tell you that this is my brother, then you'll say, oh, he's your brother. Okay, then you'll start saying, oh, he looks like you or he doesn't look like you. You now relate it to the... So this is ignorance of the person. But here, aviveka, lack of discriminative understanding, is also considered to be ignorance by the wise, by the panditaha. He says, tam etam eva lakshanam adhyasam. Adhyasam means aviveka. Adhyasam is due to aviveka. Panditaha avidya iti manyante. So this is an important point. That really speaking, when we launch into a meaningful inquiry into our own self and inquire into what is the basis of my dukkha, why are there problems in my life, I want to solve it forever, there the issue is not the classical adhyasa, not the classical ignorance, but a lack of viveka. Adhyasa due to a lack of viveka. That is the path that I have to follow in order to change the perception that I am limited and so on and so forth. And so this is the point that we went through last week. And I think there was a corollary to that, which is the next line, which is tatra evam sati yatra yat adhyasaha tat kritena doshena gunena va anumatrena apina sambadhyate. So this is a corollary that once you have an aviveka, an adhyasa, now then you have a mix-up not only between the vastus themselves, but their gunas also, their qualities also. So very typically, so for example, we can relate it to our life when we can say, I am very upset. I'm upset that something, whatever, I'm just upset. So now just consider that, I'm upset. So here, as we were discussing about the car buying a long time ago, what color of the car you had, it's exactly the same point. I'm upset. Now in the assertion, I'm upset, you have an adhyasa between yourself and the guna of your mind. So when you say I'm upset, you have already crossed over the point that I am my mind. You don't say two steps. You say, hey, why are you have a very sad looking face. Why? You don't say, first of all, I am my mind, and secondly, I am equal to the gunas of the mind, isn't it? That's exactly, there is a two-step process, but you mix them into one. You say, I am upset. So when you say I am upset, that means that I am embedded in it is the fact that I am my mind. So that is exactly what this line is saying. Tatra evam sati. That being the case. Tatra evam sati is interesting. You see? That being the case. What being the case? Avidya manyante. It is considered to be ignorance. That being the case, yatra yat adhyasaha tat kritena doshena gunena va anumatrena apina sabbadhyante. So he says, that being the case, then you, anything about the adhyasa with the guna, whether it's a pleasant guna or an unpleasant guna, doshena gunena va na sambadhyate. There is no connection whatsoever. Anyway, so this completes the assertion that avidya equals aviveka equals avidya. This is the point. Now we launch into the repercussions of it, because there is a sense of doubt. Yeah, but now the doubt is this. This is an important thing to see, and it's a complicated thing. So I think this will probably be our last detailed reading of the Shankara Bhashya. After that, I think we will say, okay, I think we got the gist of it, and let's move on to first sutra. So here is the point. Now, a doubt is raised. And before I tell you the doubt, which is on the fourth line, which starts with katham punaha. So whenever there is a text, a segment of a text which says katham punaha, and this happened in the beginning of the third paragraph, if you see. Katham punaha pratyekatmani avishaye adhyasaha. We saw that a couple of weeks ago, I think maybe last week. So the katham punaha is really more like an embedded doubt. It is not a vivada, but it's a samvada. But within the samvada there is a doubt which says, how is that? I don't understand this. So before that, let me read this one sentence, and then we will get into the doubt. That sentence is, tam etam avidya akhyam atma anatmanoho itare adhyasam puraskritya sarve pramana prameya vyavaharaha laukikaha pravittaha sarvani cha shastrani vidhi pratisheda moksha parani. Tametam vidyakhyam atma anatmanoho iteretra adhyasaha puraskritya sarve pramana prameya vyavaharaha laukikaha pravittaha sarvani cha shastrani vidhi pratisheda moksha parani. This is the sentence. So it now derives the consequence of aviveka being avidya. He says, as a consequence of this, then all our transactions, which are pramana prameya vyavaharikaha, laukikaha, loke bhavaha, all of our transactions. What kind of transactions? I see something in my life. I had an experience before. All these pramana. And so it is pramana prameya vyavaharaha. Pramana means what? Pramana means a valid means of knowledge is called pramana. Valid. So eyes are a valid means of seeing things. Well designed by Ishvara, that there is there are some qualities of an open eye where different colors and shapes enter through your iris and then strike your mind, and the mind recognizes it based on previous experience and says this person is this person, that person is that person, this is a table, this is a chair, this is a wall. All of these is called pramana praveya vyavahara. So this is a valid one. You cannot say it's invalid. You cannot say that, I say this is a sofa set sitting in front of me and you say, no, it's not a sofa set, it's an elephant. You cannot do that. It's very simple. If I see a sofa set and I know what a sofa set is, what a chair is, then it's a valid pramana. So this is valid pramana. Now, the valid pramana is based on this aviveka that we talked about earlier, adhyasa. So look at this. There is validity in the pramana, but the validity is based on adhyasa. Adhyasa means an error, means avidya, ignorance. A valid pramana is sitting on ignorance. It calmly makes this statement. Tametam vidyākhyam atma anatmanoho itra adhyasam puraskritya. Puraskritya means being based on it already. That is the basis. The adhyasa is the basis. On top of that, we have a valid pramana, which is I see a chair, I see a wall, etc., etc. He just coolly says that. He says this is the consequence of adhyasa. And now this is the classical method of teaching Vedanta. You know this very well by now, that we don't make a statement and then go on. This is the basis why in our teaching also we don't sort of make a statement and then go on without any objections from anybody else. And in fact, if somebody raises the hand and you say, sir, I don't understand this, then you say, no, I will do that later on. Why? Because we incorporate the doubts as part of the teaching itself. So having made that statement, now we've come to the doubt, which is katham punaha. So that is embedded in the teaching itself. So similarly in the Bhagavad Gita also, the teaching means that Sri Krishna teaches Arjuna the truth of what's happening, and then Arjuna's questions are embedded in it. How can you do this? I don't understand this. What is karma yoga? First of all, you were telling me jnana yoga is the best. Now you're telling me. So that is a doubt which is incorporated and then answered. This is the classical method of teaching in Vedanta. So there you don't have to say, and in fact what is said is, for most purposes, the students themselves are not as smart as the Vedantic doubt which has been deliberately posted there. So all you have to do is to just sit there and just see this dialogue between the teacher and the doubter, and you get educated in the process. So here, katham punaha, so now doubt is made. And the doubt is said, which is an important doubt, and I've already stated it before, but let me repeat it, The doubt is, how can the validity of a pramana be based on ignorance? If there is the base is ignorance, shouldn't everything be ignorant? How can you suddenly have a valid transaction? Because our transactions in life are valid. Valid in the sense they are repeatable, they can be experienced by everybody. This is what validity means. How can you say that the valid pramana is basically ignorance? I don't understand that at all. Important doubt. All of us have the same doubt. And the same doubt actually, until it is answered properly by the understanding of our own mind, prevents us from really crossing the real issue between Atma and Atma. And so we said, how can this be? We may not articulate it, but our doubt is that everything looks very real. How can this be a mistake? That's the doubt. So let me read it and then answer it. Okay? And at that point we will declare the Shankara Bhashya, Adhyasa Bhashya to be over for our purposes. Katham punaha avidyavat vishayani pratyakshadini pramani shastrani cha iti. Stop. Katham punaha avidyavat vishayani pratyakshadini pramanani shastrani cha. He says, I don't understand this. This pratyaksha. Pratyaksha means the experience through our eyes, nose, etc., etc. So this pratyaksha. And also shastras saying, if you want to go to heaven, then you have to do such and such a yaga. And the Shastra says it itself, it's written in the Vedas, that for those Swarga Kama Yajeta. There is a statement, Swarga Kama Yajeta, that if you have a Kama, if you have a desire to go to Swargaloka, and there are lots of different ones of them. There are Swargaloka that are purely based on karma. And then there are higher Swargalokas that are based on karma plus upasana. So even if you don't have a love or a commitment, you can do karma. That will take to a lower Swarga. You want to go to a higher Swarga, then you can go to, then you have to do karma plus bhakti, upasana. That will take you to all of those assertions are given in the Shastra itself. So he says that not only our own laukika pramanani, pratyakshadini, but even Shastra also says it. All it is validity. And how can you say that this is all error? So that's what he says. Katam punaha vidyavat vishayani pratyakshadini pramanini shastrani cha. Then in the language of this is the question. Uchyate. Next word is uchyate. Uchyate means, I'm glad you asked that question. Shankara himself asked the question on behalf of the doubters, and then he answers it. This is the method of teaching. Uchyate. Then uchyate means what is being said. Answer. Dehendriyadishu aham mama abhimana rahitasya pramatratva anupaputtau pramana pravittihi anupapattehi. One more time. Uchyate dehendriyadishu aham mama abhimana rahitasya pramatratva anupapattau pramana pravittihi anupapattehi. And let me read a couple of more sentences and then I will combine them all together. The next one is Nahi indriyani anupapadaya pratyakshadi vyavaharaha sambhavati na cha adhishthanam antarena indriyanam vyaparaha sambhavati na cha anadhyastam atmabhavena dehena kaschid vyapriyate न च एतस्मिन् सर्वस्मिन् सति असंगस्य आत्मनः प्रमातृत्व उपपद्यते न च प्रमातृत्वमन्तरेण प्रमाणप्रवृत्तिः अस्ति तस्मात् अविद्यावत् विषयानि एव प्रत्यक्षादीनि प्रमाणानि शास्त्राणि च इति. This is the complete set of sentences that answers it. And basically what is it saying is that, listen, your transactions that you speak of as being valid, and we agree they seem valid, all those transactions are called that you call valid transactions are based on your status as a jiva. So once you identify yourself as a jiva, as a human being here, and jiva can be even a non-human being, but since we are talking about human beings, that your identification, I am, you can interview someone and say, who are you? Well, he says, don't you see, I'm a human being. I've got hands, I've got a mind, and I'm so many feet, inches tall. I'm so old. That's the jiva. So that is a starting point for vyavahara. And once you have your status as a jiva, then within your transactions, everything appears very real. Everything is valid. But the fact is that your status as a jiva itself is false. So therefore, even the valid transactions, and this validity even extends to Shastra. So even in the Shastra, so let's go to that, which is even a more powerful example of this. That suppose you go to an established temple with very well read pujaris like Tirupati. You may have a feeling that the local temple, I'm not sure about the pujari and how well or he is and read and so on, but supposing you go to Tirupati, which is one of the most well-established temple traditions in India, and all the pujaris, the best pujaris go there and they prescribe to you what is to be done, etc., etc., and you have a lot of faith in them. Even they will look upon you first as a jiva. You tell them, so the pujari will say, what do you want? And you can tell them, my daughter is not finding the right match for her and she's getting older. Can you do a puja so that she can find something like that? And so the pujari says, okay, yeah, I think we can do that. Let's do Navagraha puja or something like this, Ganesha puja. And then you have to sit down. So all of that is based on yourself as a jiva. And we say that even the jivatvam identification is really false, like a dreamer. Ultimately, it is fluff. It will just go away. I mean, really, in our sadhana, I find the most effective sadhana for your meditation and so on is to know that you were already something before you took birth. And after our passing away, you'll go back to something else again. Same thing again. And so the whole life is like a dream which doesn't affect you at all. You are already there. Now you have assumed a new role in a movie, and then after the whole thing is done, you go back being where you came from. And you are starting for the next movie. And you are always looking for something to actualize yourself. And once you find out you are it, you don't need to actualize anything else. You are the very basis. You are the Brahman. Then the whole taking births, etc. is over. So anyway, so the thing is that like a dreamer, just like a dream, precisely like a dream, like a long dream, you may go through the transactions. So you see in the dream also, there is certain validity, but the validity is not nearly as much as in the Jagrat Avastha. So for instance, I'm sure this is your experience and certainly is my experience, that in some of the dreams, you are evaluating things. And you're saying, like I gave you that example, I mean, I'm going back, I have different examples, but when I saw my dad wearing a suit and tie, and so I'm evaluating him and I'm saying, why is he wearing this? Is he dressed up to go somewhere? Where is he going? This is in the dream. So this is a kind of like a partial validity, isn't it? Because I am expecting him to be lounging in his kurta pajama, which he normally does. And only once in a while when he had to go somewhere, then he would dress up. But normally for the whole day he will be nicely homebound and he doesn't have to wear pants and tie and so on. So when I saw him, I had a valid doubt. Why is he wearing all this? I remember this so clearly. And so other kind of dreams also have an element of validity. And so our validity in our life also is there, because this is not pratibhatika sat, but this is vyavaharika sat. The vyavaharika sat means Ishvara's creation is such that there is both vyashti and samashti as part of the experience. And so when you get up in the morning and your spouse is there, she also knows you from previous day, you also know her from the previous day, there is some establishment, there is some validity. So our whole life will disappear if the new day is beginning with no continuity. Because you say hello to your spouse and the spouse doesn't know who you are, and then she'll say, what? Who are you? What are you doing in this home? All those kinds of crazy things will happen. Doesn't happen. So there is needed validity. But the needed validity is for you as a Jagrat Jiva. And so the main point is here in the whole contention, and what I would request you to do because of the time, because I want to go to start the first sutra now, I think, as I promised you. What I request you to do is to, if you like, especially the ones who really know Sanskrit, you can read through these sentences. And I think Swami Gambhirananda's book does a very good job, I think, of staying close to the translation of a sentence by sentence. So this should be all given In fact, let me just read this for you, just so that. So, this is on page 4 of the book. And so, he asks a question, opponent. So, instead of opponent, I would say doubter. Doesn't matter. How again, katham punaha, how again can the means of valid knowledge, such as direct perception, pratyaksham, as well as the scriptures, shastrani, have their locus, a cognizer who is subject to ignorance? How? Answer. Since a man without self-identification with the body, mind, senses, etc. cannot become a cognizer, and as such the means of knowledge cannot function for him, since perception and other activities of a man are not possible without accepting the senses as his own, since the senses cannot function, etc., etc. So he does a good job of really translating Shankara's arguments to it, and I would recommend that you go through that if you are interested. It'll be good for you to go through, especially for those of you that know Sanskrit, go through each sentence and then find out the translation in Swami Gambhirananda's book. So you may want to do that. Now, one other thing, and then we are done with this. He says, I'm now reading back to the Sanskrit again. So we saw, tasmat avidyavat vishayani eva pratyakshadini pramanani shastrani cha iti. That means a conclusion, which started with tatra evam sati, and it starts with tasmat avidyavat. This is all done. Then he gives another confirmation of this. He says, pashvadibihi cha avisheshat. This is a very famous reference to this. I see this being referenced at various places. And so this is where it comes from. He says, pashvadibihi cha avisheshat. So means that this is also true for animals. True for animals. Why is he giving this confirmation, this example? We'll see in a minute. And that will be our final thing. He says, yatha hi pashvadayaha shabdadibihi shotradinam sambandhe sati शब्दादि विज्ञाने प्रतिकूले जाते ततो निवर्तन्ते अनुकूले च प्रवर्तन्ते यथा दंडोद्यतकरं पुरुषं अभिमुखम् उपलभ्य मां हन्तुम् इच्छति इति पलायितुम् आरभन्ते हरित तृणपूर्ण पाणिलुब् उपलभ्यं च तं प्रति अभिमुखी भवन्ति एवं पुरुषा अपि व्युत्पन्नचित्ताः क्रूरदृष्टिना आक्रोशतः खड्गोद्यतकरान् बलवदुपलभ्य ततो निवर्तन्ते तद्विपरीतान् प्रति अभिमुखन्ति भवन्ति अतः समानः पश्वादिभिः पुरुषाणां प्रमाणप्रमेय व्यवहारः. He says, listen, Adi Shankara says, this phenomena. What phenomena? The phenomena of following the valid pramana prameya vyavahara is true even for animals. And what do the animals do? So he's talking about a cow here, really. A cow, if it sees that a person is offering some green grass in his hand, the cow moves towards the person to get the grass from him or her. And so the cow has open eyes, it says that this green grass is something I want. And this person has it. And therefore it moves towards the grass in a very friendly manner. And kind of like thank you in her eyes, grabs the grass. Adi Shankara says, supposing this person tries to attract the cow with the green grass, then midway through he does a trick. And the trick is he moves the grass on the backside of it and takes a heavy stick and makes faces to the cow. What will the cow do? The cow will say, oops, this is not what I want to do. And I have been beaten by sticks before, because there are cowherds that just ask them to just go in a given direction by kind of hitting them with a stick. And I don't want that to happen. So the cow retreats. First of all, it went forward, then it retreats. This is called valid pramana prameya vyavahara. And why are we giving this example of an animal? And before I do that, why we are giving the example of the animal, then Shankara says, so this is what he says, Pashvadibhi Shotradinam Sambandhe Sati Shabdadi Vijnane Pratikule Jato Tato Nivartante Anukuleta Pravartante. If it is Anukula, then it goes forward. It is Pratikula, that Nivartante. And so similarly, Purushamamapi Vyutpanna Chittaha. He says exactly the same thing happens to human beings. That if you have some friendly people who are saying, Namaste, Aye, please come to our house, Aye, then you move towards it. But if you have a dangerous looking person who has a gun in his hand and he says, please come, please, will you go towards that person? No. So he says, Samana Vyavahara, exactly the same situation is there for both human beings and animals. Why does that mean? It means that both of them, this is the point, both the cow as well as the human being rely upon their identification with their body and mind in order to make decisions about pramana prameya vyavahara. Without that identification, none of the transactions will make sense, and so the very basis of all transaction is your identification with the body-mind, which is equally false for the animal as well as for human being. Equally false. Therefore, it concludes that the objection that how can there be a valid set of transactions based on adhyasa, aviveka, avidya, how is that possible? It is possible because basically we are talking about transactional reality which is within the sphere of the transactions valid. But when you talk about paravartika sat, not vyavaharika sat, it becomes invalid. Just like within the dream itself it is valid, it is some validity, but when you really wake up from it, then the whole sequence of validity, pramana, prameya, everything, pramata, everything just goes away. Therefore, in fact, I would just skip some of the more detailed lines after this, because he talks about the Shastriya Vyavahara in more detail. I just summarized it in terms of the Swargaloka, the example I gave earlier. Then he says, in the very end, so he says the Shastra is basically engaged in removing the aviveka. And so just like in the previous one, the first sentence of the fourth paragraph, the second line of the fourth paragraph, he says, one was Panditaha avidya iti manyante tad vivekena cha vastu swarupa avadharam vidyam ahu. So vidyam ahu means, knowledge means removing the viveka, or removing the aviveka. So the entire set of our Vedantic literature is to remove the lack of discrimination between Atma and Anatma as an Anuviveka. And that, once that is done, then the praptasya praptihi, then you already know that what you have mistaken itself for. You are like the non-formless space, but you've taken yourself to be a room full of formful space due to aviveka. And so that aviveka, once it is gone and understood, then you don't have the sense that I'm being enclosed by the walls. I'm being enclosed by the body-mind. You are really basically free. So he concludes that by saying, in the very last line, Vedanta mimamsa shastrasya vyachikyatisitam tasya idam adimam sutram. In fact, even before that. So, yathacha ayamarthaha sarvesham vedantanam tatha vayam asyam sharika mimamsayam pradarshayishyamaha. So he says, all of this I am going to now embark on. Pradishyashama means, now I will show it to you how Sharika Mimamsayam. So Sharirakam here means Sharire Bhavam, which is the Vedanta Shastra, which is the Brahma Sutra, and the Mimamsa means, in a very logical manner, I will show it to you how this aviveka will, once it is removed, leads to your freedom. And this is a methodical treatise of Vedanta Shastra in the form of Brahma Sutra. So he says, now he begins, he says, Vedanta Mimamsa Shastrasya Vyachikyasitasya idam adimam sutram. So Vyachikyasitam means one Vyakhya, one which is I am desirous of doing an explanation of this, and from that perspective we will begin the first sutra. So with that he concludes his Adhyasa Bhashya, and I hope that you got a good sense of the Adhyasa Bhashya by now. We had already gone through the logical explanation that was so kindly provided by Swami Paramarthananda, and then we followed that up with a more specific textual treatment of it, followed by some translations from Swami Gambhirananda. And so with this I conclude the Adhyasa Bhashya section, and we now begin the main study of the Brahma Sutra with the very first sutra. Okay? So if I have your permission, we will now do that. I think this section of the page is now over. We don't need it anymore. And we will now go back to, for the time being, the classes that were taught by Swami Paramarthananda. And we will now begin now back to a logical introduction, a conceptual introduction to the first sutra. And then we will find the text in Shankara Bhashya also for that. So that's always, I think, our methodology will be to first look at the conceptual treatment by Swami Paramarthananda, and then we will follow that up with a specific translation of the Shankara Bhashya for each of the 4 sutras. Right now my commitment to this class is to finish 4 sutras, which is traditionally done as an introduction to Brahma Sutra, and after that we will pause to see whether we should continue or not. Okay. All right, so we have about 10-12 more minutes. Okay, so the first sutra says Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. So, as we had seen before, there are 4 adhyayas in the entire Brahma Sutra. 4 chapters, major adhyayas. Then, within the adhyayas, there are some subsections called padaha. And within the padas, there are adhikarana. If you recall, this is already something that we did a few days ago, some few classes ago. So, adhikarana is a topic. So it's a particular topic with a beginning, an end, a significance and importance. So this is how I define a topic. So there are various adhikaranas in the entire Brahma Sutra. And sometimes in a given sutra there are multiple adhikaranas. But that's not the case in the first sutra. The first, second, third and fourth sutras are not only sutras, they are also a single adhikarana sutra. There's only one topic for each one of 4 of them. So the first one, Athato Brahma Jigyasa, is called Jigyasa Adhikaranam. What does the word Jigyasa mean? So, Jigyasa in the Panini grammar is considered to be sananta. So, sananta means that it is the type of san pratyaya. And it stands for intensity of that verb. Intensity means very seriousness of it. So jigyasa means jnatum ichha. Jnatum ichha means desire to know. Desire to know is jnatum ichha, and the sananta of jnatum ichha is jigyasa, an intense desire to know is the meaning of the word jigyasa. So the first adhikarana, what's first topic of the Brahma Sutra, the first sutra of the Brahma Sutra is jigyasa adhikaranam. So the topic is the intensity of desire. This is the topic. And we can say, you cannot say I have an extremely intense desire. So this is not complete, because the person will say, of what? And then supposing you keep quiet. You say, I really want it. And then the other person says, want what? He says, I don't know. I just want it. It doesn't make any sense. So you always have to say, when you have any desire, and especially intense desire, you can say, for example, sometimes, my life is full of desires. It's a general assertion. It doesn't require any particular end, and that's acceptable. We all of us have desires, so that's okay. But supposing you say, wow, I have a desire too. So the person says, yes. Complete the sentence. He says, no, I'm not going. That doesn't make any sense. Desire for what? Brahma jigyasa. I have to desire to know Brahman. And then the first two prefixes to the sutra is atha and ataha. So athato. According to the sandhi rules, the visarga ahataha becomes to, u becomes u, becomes athato brahma jigyasa. But when you break it down, it becomes ataha brahma jigyasa. So atha, we will do all of this analysis, the word analysis. Swami Paramarthananda will guide us through this in a very, very nice way. The word atha means thereafter. Now then, you say now then. So when you say now then means what? Now means now having done these, the next thing is called atha. And we also saw that Brahmaji, not Brahman, but Brahmaji, in the very beginning, athato Brahma, he had said atha om atha om atha. So that's just that's a very blessing. But here the word atha means thereafter. Thereafter, ataha. Ataha means therefore. So at the very face of it, the translation of the first sutra, which will be exhaustively analyzed, there's a lot inside of that. But on the face of it, the translation is thereafter, therefore, there is an intense desire to know Brahman. This is the short translation. It doesn't really make a lot of sense for us. So all of this will be explained, but it means ataha Brahma jigyasa. Thereafter, therefore, there is an intense desire to know Brahman. This is the first sutra. So, I'll say two other things in a couple of minutes, few minutes, and then we will end with this. First is that the way Swami Paramarthananda is deciding to treat the explanation of the sutras, he does it in 3 sections. One is an analysis of the sutra in general, what is called Samanya Vicharaha. So Samanya Vicharaha means a general explanation of the sutra, just an overall explanation. Very nice, this should be done. Then the second one is called the word analysis, Shabda Vicharaha, or you can even say Vishesha Vicharaha. Vishesha means specific. Shabda Vicharaha means one where the words are taken up, and we will do so. So the word Atha will be taken up independent of the others. Why is the word Atha important here? Ataha will be taken up, Brahma will be taken up, and Jigyasa will be taken up. By the way, I should mention on the word Brahma in the entire Brahma Sutra only appears once, which is here. It is just amazing. So the Brahma is a noun, and from this point on, this is how the sutra is, very precise. So this is the noun, this is the subject. After that, everything is a pronoun. So you talk about a person, you identify a person, and then you can say, you talk about her, she went here, she did this, she's the mother of such and such, she's the wife of such and such, she. But the word, you could just take a name of a person, only appears once. Amazing. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. After this, the word Brahma never appears in all 555 sutras. Anyway, that's on the side. So 3 sections of the coverage of each sutra. One is Samanya Vichara, second one is word analysis, and the third one is conclusion of the sutra. Conclusion of the sutra would also mean contextual. Why this one? This is of course the very first one. So even the first one will have a context. When you say Atha, it means thereafter. Thereafter what? All of that will be discussed. But the second sutra onwards will be a context. Why is this sutra placed here? Why is that important? So that will all be done in the third section, which is the conclusion of the sutra, also called Upasamhara. So Samanya Vichara, Vishesha Vichara, and Upasamhara. So this is how it would be done. Now the first sutra has a peculiarity about it which is not shared by any other sutra. Of course, we already said one, which is that the only place where Brahma is mentioned, but there is something more to it. That is going to require some time, so I think I will stop here and defer that portion of discussing the peculiarity of the first sutra, and then of course the analysis of the sutra itself to the next class. So at least I fulfilled the promise of wrapping up the Adhyasa Bhashya and starting with the first sutra today, and now we will be discussing the sutras from now on. So let's finish the 5 verses of Dakshinamurti Stotram and with a prayer, and then I will have some time for questions. Rahu grasta divankarendu sadrisho maya samachadinat sanmatra karanopasamharnato yo bhut sushuptaf puman pragaswapsamiti prabodha samaye yapatya vigyayate tasmai shri gurumurtaye namaidam shri dakshinamurtaye बाल्यादिष्वपि जाग्रदादिषु तथा सर्वास्वस्थास्वपि व्यावृत्तास्वनुवर्तमानमहमित्यन्तःस्फुरन्तं सदा स्वात्मानं प्रकटीकरोति भजतां यो मुद्रया भद्रया तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये विश्वं पश्यति कार्यकारणतया स्वस्वामी सम्बन्धतः शिष्याचार्य तथैव पुत्रपुत्रात्यात्मना भेदतः स्वप्ने जागृति वा य एष पुरुषो माया परिभ्रामितः तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये भूरम्भांस्य नलो नीलो अम्बरन्महर्नार्थो हिमांशुः पुमान् इत्याभाति चराचरात्मकमिदं यस्यैव मूर्त्यष्टकम् नान्यत् किञ्चिन विद्यते विमृशतां यस्मात् परस्मात् विभोः तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये सर्वात्मत्वमिति स्फुटीकृतमिदं यस्मादमुष्मिंस्तवे तेनास्य श्रवणात् तदर्थमननात् ध्यानात् च संकीर्तनात् सर्वात्मत्वमहाविभूतिसहितं स्यादीश्वरत्वं स्वतः सिद्ध्येत् तत्पुनरष्टधा परिणतं चैश्वर्यमव्याहतम् अशुभानि निराचष्टे तनोति शुभसन्ततिं स्मृतिमात्रेण यत्पुंसां ब्रह्म तन्मङ्गलं परम् अतिकल्याणरूपत्वात् नित्यकल्याणसंश्रयात् स्मर्तॄणां वरदत्वाच्च ब्रह्म तन्मङ्गलं विदुः ओङ्कारश्चाथ शब्दश्च द्वौ वेतौ ब्रह्मणः पुरा कण्ठं भित्त्वा विनिर्यातौ तस्मान्माङ्गलिकौ बुभौ ॐ अथ ॐ अथ ॐ अथ So wonderful to see all of you. So great. It's wonderful. Very happy to talk to all of you. And I don't see any questions per se. And but anyway, wonderful. And we will look forward to seeing you next week. Okay. Om.